So good morning, everyone. That was a pretty good intro. So I'm going to tell you a few things about myself because I always find it interesting to learn about people. One of them has absolutely nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today, but just in case if you see me somewhere after this lecture and I ignore you 100%, I have an identical twin sister who does not have anything to do with architecture Canada. She's the smart one of the two of us. The other thing that I wanted to tell you is that it's a little bit of a kind of a, I don't know if I call it deja vu, but an interesting thing. So I have been around in the business working for about 30 years. And when I started in Ottawa, I studied in Ottawa, live in Ottawa, and worked in Ottawa to begin with. Ottawa was, I wouldn't say Ottawa is kind of the leading edge of Canada. I would say it's almost the opposite. It's a very conservative town, a lot of government. So 30 years ago, we were actually making the transition from literally drafting on the drafting board to CAD, using CAD in the offices. And in the educational institutions, the university I was going to, there was absolutely no CAD courses or education offered at Carleton University or Ottawa U. So I did go to Algonquin College at the same time to learn it, and that's the reason why I got my first job, because it was a really kind of down economy. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because it's interesting. The federal government, again in Ottawa, is in kind of a similar situation with BIM. It's a business decision on how to move forward to support, efficiencies and a better management of our portfolio. So I'm going to be looking backwards to make sure that I'm clicking the slides in the right sequence. So thank you everyone for having me here. It is a pleasure and an opportunity for me to share with you a little bit of insights about Public Services and Procurement Canada, which is but one department within the federal government, and perhaps have some thoughts about how what we're doing might influence the entire federal government. One thing that is for sure, within Public Services and Procurement Canada itself, and even within my branch, Real Property, there really isn't a lot of clarity about the understanding of what BIM is, at what BIM can do to support our portfolio. So we are moving towards greater clarity, and I can tell you that as we move forward, there is, I would say, not a fear, but a hesitation, because BIM presents opportunities, but it also presents challenges where every single one of our processes, from procurement, from operations and management, from design, from the way we engage consultants to deliver those services on our behalf, is going to have to change. And it's going to take a lot of work from a diverse group within the department to do that. So what I'm going to talk to you about next is, a very high level. It's not technical at all. It's about, opportunities and perhaps how we may continue to work together to move this agenda forward within the federal government. I'll give you a little bit of context about the federal government and Public Services and Procurement Canada. I'll talk to you a little bit about the catalysts that have made PSPC, my department, decide to move forward. I'll give you some priorities at the federal level and our departmental level, and the linkages of those priorities with BIM. I'll give you a snapshot of the portfolio, what we've done as a department to begin with the work on BIM, some of the challenges that I anticipate moving forward, how what we're doing aligns with the roadmap, and overall how the federal government can think about moving forward. So I don't think that this slide, at least the left part, is necessarily, a secret to anyone. PSPC has taken a long time to think about adopting BIM, partly because up until now there's been a lot of either economic recession or uncertainty. We do spend taxpayers' money, so it is a not-for-profit type of organization. We do have to be very careful about the decisions that we make and the investments that the federal government makes. And while we were thinking about that, the economy, significantly declined in Ottawa. So even though we might have been thinking about how we could be more efficient in our operations, there wasn't the money to invest in those kinds of technologies or tools. So from about 2008 to 2018, and this is not an exaggeration, many departments, including mine, sometimes didn't have enough operation and maintenance money to actually, do regular cleaning and wash windows and pay the rent for some cases. So it wasn't a great place to work in terms of opportunities for innovation and technology application. In the last year and a half or so, with the new federal government as well as the interest in the federal government, so from about late 2016 to now, there's been a significant change. Although there was investment in infrastructure before, accelerated infrastructure programs, which some of you might have heard about and been part of, it was more at the provincial level as well as infrastructure, roads and so on. So it didn't really touch our buildings very much. So available staff was a challenge. In terms of BIM and many other areas. It still is, but it's an opportunity more now than a challenge. The abundance of proof of an effective tool for real property owners was also a challenge for us. We're not early adopters of too many things, so we do have to kind of wait to see how everyone else is using it, how successful it is, and I think we're at that point now, where there is a comfort level from a property owner's perspective to move forward in the application of things such as BIM and other things that I'm going to share with you. In the last probably 5 years, we've seriously focused on our property portfolio as a corporate real estate model rather than just a building by building approach. The other opportunity that has come up is that we are in the process of developing major recapitalization programs for our assets. So I'm going to tell you something obvious, but it's so obvious that sometimes we wonder in PSPC why we haven't thought about it. Money has something to do with it. So I've been with the department off and on for about 25 years. The buildings are 25 years older than the day that I started working there. We have not changed the way that we operate and maintain those buildings, nor the technology that we use to operate and maintain those buildings, for the large part. And I can't speak for other departments, but I have to tell you that we are the only real department that is focused and is mandated with real property and management. So I'll give you an example. Health Canada is a custodial department. They own buildings, but their mandate and focus is not real property, it's health. And that's true with every other department. So think about it, there's 27 custodial departments who own all kinds of buildings, but the only ones that are focused on thinking about it is us, and we're not leading edge, right? So there's a huge opportunity, I think, and the timing is absolutely right. The other, I think, really important piece for consideration for our department and the federal government as a whole is that there's a new emphasis on sustainability, the environment, and the reduction of greenhouse gases. Again, BIM is something that can play a significant role in helping us achieve all those things. So some of the catalysts, you may or may not be aware that our real property branch assistant deputy minister did sign the statement of intention to support building information modeling open standards. That may not sound like a lot, but it is a public statement, and a kind of public statement that I don't think the federal government has made in this arena ever before. And what it's doing for us, it's opening up the doors for moving forward. I mentioned previously the catalyst, the sustainability umbrella, and the focus on greenhouse gas reductions. The move from project-driven to portfolio-driven decisions and approach. It sounds logical, but we haven't quite effectively done it until probably the last few years, where we're actually developing a national portfolio strategy. And again, driven by, a portfolio, a number of buildings, and we also have bridges, dams, wharfs that need serious attention. The other piece which is linked and important is that there's a renewed federal emphasis on transparency and being able to access information and share information, and I think BIM can help in that area as well. This is a snapshot a little bit about, very specific to the federal government. So the visual on the left is what we call our Sustainable Development Strategy. And that is mandated through the departments by Environment Canada, but it does have very specific targets for a number of departments for reduction of greenhouse gases. And BIM can support a number of those. We see BIM supporting the sustainability pillars, the three of them on the right, which is society, economy, and environment, and we see that BIM supporting those very strongly and effectively. So where we link BIM and sustainability in the area of more collaboration, better data, and ultimately less waste, whether it's material waste or time and resources waste. So we're looking for solutions that will promote visualization before costly and wasteful changes. Again, we spend taxpayers' money. Solutions that will promote collaboration. We recognize that we work a lot, very much so in silos, and that's not the effective way to do it. Promote improved decision making, and that also promote long-term life cycle and sustainable thinking. So I'm not going to give you the goals of the Sustainable Development Strategy, but I can tell you that we've looked at that and the links to BIM, and out of the 6 Sustainable Development Goals that's mandated for each department, BIM can effectively support 6 out of those 8. I can share with you later on what those Sorry, I'm gonna try and go back. There we go. Okay, so I'll give you some examples of some of the things that our department, PSPC, is doing that we absolutely think BIM can help in. And these are linked. So our department is the very first department to develop a strategy for a national carbon neutral portfolio plan. That means that we've committed above and beyond the Sustainable Development Strategy requirements that by the year 2030 our entire portfolio will be carbon neutral. So that sounds really good. We're achieving it so far. We've actually exceeded the 2030 goals for the Sustainable Development Strategy, but the next challenge is okay, so how are we going to track that? How are we going to report it? How are we going to ensure that every project that our department delivers for ourselves and for every other government department for which we provide services to is going to be able to do the same, right? The other thing we've done is we're looking at district energy. Again, taking a look at what we have, how we can connect outside of the federal government, not only with other levels of government, but the private industry. So we've also committed to 100% clean power by 2025. How do we track and report on those things? One of the things we have done, we are the first federal department, and I think the first federal government, which has undergone the Energy Star rating process for every single one of our assets. So all of our assets are on that system on Portfolio Manager. So we've got the benchmark for all of our buildings, and we're moving forward to begin to track those by implementing smart building technologies in every single one of our Crown-owned facilities. Again, we're the very first federal government department to do that. We have opened up all those opportunities in terms of tools and access to consultants to every other federal department. But again, those are transactional things in the context of our portfolio. And now, how do we tie that to the operation and maintenance, to then the project delivery, to the demolition and divestiture, kind of the life cycle? So I'm going to give you a bit of a snapshot of what the real property portfolio looks like. This is intel, I think, for you as a potential service provider and supporter of what we're trying to do. So the red piece there, so if every custodial department, every piece of property in the federal government were the entire pie, the red is us. As you can see, we're not the biggest player in the pie, but we are the one that are likely, along with other large custodial departments, to be leading the way as examples on how to do something with our real estate properties for other custodial departments. I did mention, and I'm going to mention again, so we are the only real department that has the mandate for real property and the management of real property. 27 custodial departments that own properties come to us for services. And we don't actually do the work ourselves. We hire consultants to do that. So we develop the tools, procurement vehicles to hire architects, engineers, all kinds of experts, environmentalists to deliver their projects and ours. So although it may not sound like an important piece, as I mentioned before, we are kind of like the gateway to the other custodial departments and we have the opportunity to set the pace and to set the standards. Within our own portfolio, Another interesting piece is that we've committed, in order to support industry, again, because we do have taxpayers' money in mind, that about 50% of our portfolio is going to be Crown-owned and the rest is going to be leased. So even though we can make decisions about our portfolio and try to influence the rest of the federal government, it's just as important that we work in partnership with the other landlords and property owners to have a level playing field because it's very, very difficult for us to explain as an employer why we would have standards that are different for employees that are in Crown-owned facilities versus leased facilities. And that is always the question that comes up when, there's a health and safety concern, or where there's a concern about comfort in a space, or a concern about how taxpayers' money is being invested efficiently. The next slide here, again, a little bit of intel for you. Although Ottawa is probably the most conservative of all the provinces in terms of moving forward, it is where 50%, a little bit over 50% of our portfolio is located. So it is where the decisions are made, and it is where things kind of have a ripple effect from. So I'll give you a bit of a snapshot of what we've done in Public Services and Procurement Canada in terms of BIM and the life cycle elements of that. So if we look at the life cycle of from the BIM perspective, we've investigated and procured several of the phases of BIM, and those are the ones that are showing in red. But one of the things that to keep in mind, we've done that transactionally, not for every single project that we've delivered. And right now, the decision-making process within our department of whether we use BIM on our projects or not is unclear. When it's used or not is unclear, so there's no real framework to decide. The next slide tells you a little bit more of what we're currently investigating and applying it. Some of you might know that the Parliamentary Precinct branch of our department is undertaking a very large program of work as part of their long-term vision plan for the Hill. And Centre Block and a number of other projects are underway. They are applying the broader spectrum that I've highlighted here of the phases of BIM and in a more integrated way. Still to be investigated is the one that's in gray, the demolition and divestiture program. It may not seem big, but it is in the context of PSPC and custodial departments. One of the things we're realizing is that our portfolios are old. A lot of them are very inefficient. Some of them won't be effective taxpayers' money investment decisions to renovate them. So we do have to figure out how to best divest of those properties. And in my opinion, that's going to be as big as a decision to do it right, to ensure that we're not making the environment worse by doing that, than managing the properties that we will decide to keep ourselves. So some of the challenges within our department, which I've kind of touched on. So currently we have data on just a few projects that have applied BIM, but we do plan to gather this information during the engagement exercise when I say our regions, we are spread across the country. My department has 5 other regions that we do collaborate with, and that they deliver projects for our department and other departments within the regional context. It's also not currently clear who decides BIM, as I mentioned before, and its use in projects, and that requires a strategy for formalization within my branch, my department, and hopefully that will kind of trickle out to other departments as we move forward. We have developed a roadmap, but at present it's based on goodwill and good business decision, its application. The only way that it's going to be broadly successful within our department and in the federal government is through legislation or some kind of policy that needs to come from a central agency. And in our world, central agencies is Treasury Board Secretariat or Privy Council Office. So until that happens, it's based on goodwill and an interest to improve, our business processes and procurement processes and so on. The next few slides are not going to be any news to you in terms of what I'm going to show, but I'm going to try to link it to how it to what Public Services and Procurement Canada is doing. So what we've done is essentially made the conscious decision to adopt the roadmap for BIM that you have all worked on to develop. So this is very, very familiar to all of you, I'm sure. I won't tell you what it is, give you any details, but what I will tell you is that the great work that this represents is what Public Services and Procurement Canada has decided to adopt moving forward. And we've made the conscious decision, and we don't always do that, to not create our own tool, to not replicate and make it, somehow customized for ourselves. We are using this roadmap and applying it to ourselves. So the next slide, although you can't read any of it, it does have stuff that really has meaning. We've taken the roadmap and the 6 streams and have actually laid it out over a 5+ year phased approach, and under each stream and under each year we do have activities that we've committed to move this forward within our department. So we are applying the hard work that this group and many others have contributed to. So the next few slides are just examples within some of the streams of the work that we've done within PSPC. So the first one, the consult piece, is really important for us because it's not just about PSPC. We've done consultation and engagement with internal stakeholders, and I'll give you some examples of what that means. So within our organization, we have to talk to our contracting authority and our legal departments about what this means and what we can and cannot do right now, and lay out a plan moving forward. There's a group within our organization called the owner-investor. They are essentially the group that holds the portfolio, that decides how the money is allocated within the portfolio, and those decisions are made based on input, support, and recommendations from groups such as mine, from the technical and environmental piece, as well as procurement and so on. The IMIT plan members, they are, I have to tell you, the most challenging group within our organization, because although you think they'd be the easiest, there are so many rules that don't make sense that hold us back. And trust me, I live the frustration as much as you do, that things that are ready to go take years to actually implement in terms of the IMIT world. Our regions and our branches, as I mentioned before, are also stakeholders, because although I am the policymaker within our organization, I do have to collaborate with the delivery arms. They are the ones that will actually undertake this and use it. We've had engagement also with external stakeholders outside of the federal government and with other government departments, colleagues within the National Defense, who are sitting at the table to the left. National Research Council, we've collaborated with and continue to do so. Standards Council of Canada, and many more to come. The pie with the different federal government custodians. The only other really significant custodian that's come to the table is National Defense. They are big, but they're not the only ones. So engagement with industry is also a major priority, and there are some areas within my organization, some kind of windows where we engage. So the Federal Industry Real Property Advisory Council, which I co-chair with industry in Ottawa, is a representation of industry from construction, from the consultant community, as well as the major custodial departments that have the authority to contract themselves, so they don't have to come to public services to do that. We're collaborating very much so with Building Smart Canada and international organizations for standardization. So these engagements represent only a small portion of the contacts that we're building, and we're going to keep adding to that engagement. So education. Is it important to us? Absolutely, because we have very, very few knowledgeable people in BIM. I have to say, I think we only have one within the entire federal department. And she's very young, very eager, but not a lot of it, no experience yet in the workforce. So we have to figure out how to kind of marry, that level of interest and engagement and enthusiasm with an organization that's not that young anymore. Find a way to attract the people that are enthusiastic, that are knowledgeable in BIM, and that also are interested in understanding how it can be applied to the federal government portfolio context. It is a very different context than the private sector. It is. We are building owners, but the way we proceed, how we make investment decisions are different than the private sector. So we have also, as part of this, been in discussions with academic institutions within the Ottawa area, Carleton University, Algonquin College. And in terms of how we move forward, we do think that there's value in the thought of the accreditation process for BIM experts. Without that, it becomes more challenging for government organizations to identify what kind of expertise we would be looking for and what kind of expertise we would be hiring. So the more defined it is, the easier it is for a federal organization from a human resources and hiring perspective to move forward. This is a bit of a snapshot of the develop piece. And it's really interesting because when I first saw this slide, I thought, is anybody going to get this? But I'll kind of run it through you by color coding. So the little graphics there that are in black, those are the existing procurement documents that we use. So we use essentially general conditions contracts, and then we use the project brief to support that when we hire our consultants to deliver our projects. The documents that are identified in red are now the components to those documents that are being developed and being used in the pilot projects that we're working, which is the phase 1 kind of on the previous graphic. And those are the documents that are now housing the BIM particular conditions and the BIM specific tools and templates. So we are actually test driving those right now in a couple of projects, but some of them, the West Memorial Building, it's a significant project in our portfolio. It's a heritage building. The blue documents, which is top right, is the planned future BIM standard guide, which we are working on right now, and it's intended to dictate how our project managers, the ones responsible for delivering, not designing and defining, and the contracted facility management organizations BIM requirements and how consultants will deliver on those requirements. So those documents are under development, and when I say under development, it's a team of 1.5, right? So all of this is now a team of 1.5 people for the entire department. But we are committed to getting this done. The green documents are 2 collaborative deliverables that have been added to the required services within BIM execution planning and software protocol definition, and those are not even started yet. So we've got a plan, but we're hopeful that we can engage more BIM experts and to help us along. The next slide gives you a snapshot of the deploy activities that we're committed to and that we're hoping to achieve over about 5+ years. The first one we're currently at, so we do have pilot projects that are underway, as I mentioned before, and those are actually quite interesting because they do represent properties in our portfolio that are very significant. West Memorial Building, I don't know if all of you know Ottawa, but it's a significant building in our portfolio, not because it's necessarily a great building yet. It has a history of being a great building, but it is a historic property. It's very strategically located, and it's been empty for a while. So it gets a lot of attention for all the wrong reasons, but it gets a lot of attention. And I'm getting to the end of this presentation, and I recognize it's very high level, so I'm hoping that if you do have questions, there's time to do that. One of the pieces moving forward, as I've mentioned before, we are but one department, but we do have the opportunity to be seen as a leader in this within the federal government. We have played that role, and we are playing that role right now in areas. My team is of asbestos management, Legionella management. Again, there is some standardization within the federal government, but we're still seen as the ones that lead it because we develop the standards, because we develop the processes to apply, the life cycle improvement processes, the contracting tools, the procurement tools. So Our hope is that we would be championing a unified federal digital built environment strategy that addresses sustainability within our real property portfolio as well as the overall portfolio of the federal government. And we hope also that the ongoing engagement with industry develops and that we maintain the lines of communications and collaborations, and that those grow outside of the ones that exist primarily between ourselves and the industry and D&D and yourselves. That's it at a high level. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Alan Partington, Next Architecture. One of the things I wanted to ask, it's a bold move to change the department that has lasted so long. It's around procurement, and if the bulk of your buildings is in Ottawa, 52%, chances are that's where you're going to gravitate the BIM initiative towards. Logic will tell you that's where it's going to be. So is the procurement going to look at alignment where it doesn't just favor locally firms within the Ottawa area, so that given that this is a Canada-wide BIM initiative and there's great talent from coast to coast to coast, then how might the procurement be looked at to favor and create a level playing field for firms in Vancouver, Yellowknife, Calgary, or other places to work on these projects without prejudice because they have to travel?
So that's a really good question. I'll give you my perspective, and I've had a lot of experience with that kind of question on a number of different procurements. So, and not procurement of technology, but procurement of services through consultants. So I am in a position, because I am the national functional lead that sets direction and policy of how we should do things in the technical world, to apply consistently to our portfolio, to have those kinds of discussions with the procurement group. When we have those kinds of discussions, what we also always have to consider is, what we have to consider when, so if we do a national procurement tool and open it up to everyone, is the potential of, travel costs from a consultant in Vancouver to deliver projects in Ottawa a significant potential cost to the taxpayer? Yes or no? And if we can answer no to most of those questions, then it supports the decision to have a national tool. So, for example, right now, for the well, we call it a standing offer. It's essentially a procurement tool that we just put out and finished awarding for smart buildings. It is a national tool. So it was open to Canada as a whole, and then the service providers could be from anywhere in Canada, and what we've done is apply it regionally, but the service provider is national across Canada. So I would say that in this particular situation, the opportunities are much broader and greater to allow a national tool than a regionally based tool. So, and we would not promote a regionally based tool if the national one is as effective or more, because from my perspective, if it's a national tool, procurement tool, it ensures consistency much more than the regionally based ones. So we moving forward, my objective is to make this a national tool with and it's not me that puts it out on the street, is procurement, but I have to have those discussions with them still.
Hi, Velo Everett from Everett. We're in Toronto. One of the things we were curious about was in terms of, again, speaking on procurement, I don't know if you guys can hear me. Is that okay, the mic? There are, as we know, lots of different delivery methods now. The original design bid build, design build, P3, design assist. We've got construction management, obviously lean construction and integrated project delivery. But BIM, I think most will agree, is enabling all kinds of new delivery methods for the project, and that we're not necessarily stuck with, even IPD potentially will become an old methodology. How do you see, which procurement vehicle do you see may be as the one that you would adopt. Obviously, there's a lot of P3 projects. Do you see design bid build as a typical way to market? And I know that D&D, for example, is looking at a lot of design assist projects as well, where they're looking at different ways of doing it.
So I don't think that my department would pick just one. And to be very honest, the decision-making process on what, delivery methodology is used is not always consistent either. But I know that D&D is exploring what you've mentioned. We are, kind of discussing with them how they're moving forward, how it's working for them. I would say that our department would probably always be focused on using a variety of methodologies. Hopefully, the most applicable ones to the projects at hand, but not always, because some of those decisions are sometimes influenced by the environment, by the leadership, by politics.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.